Wow. Hey guys, so I'm foregoing the usual Kubrick Corner introductory spiel today because it's midnight on Tuesday and I've just come back from the London IMAX multimedia screening of Christopher Nolan's World War II epic Dunkirk. I'm very, very lucky in my job that I get to see films in advance of their release, and wow, is this one special. I've come back from London to Bristol where I live, and I've decided to do a video now because I really want to get my thoughts off my chest about this movie, because it's one of the biggest movies of the summer and indeed of the year, and it's a really big grandiose cinematic spectacle in the grandest possible tradition. So what's to say about Dunkirk in the immediate aftermath of my having seen it? Well, to give it a bit of context, so it dramatises the May and June 1940 Operation Dynamo evacuation of Allied soldiers from the beaches of Dunkirk in northern France. In large part thanks to the civilian flotilla vessels that came over from England to rescue the soldiers and bring them back home again. And as I said, it's directed by Christopher Nolan, who made the Dark Knight trilogy, Memento, Inception, Insomnia, Interstellar, and it's a really sort of big, involving movie, and an interesting one as well, because it's actually Christopher Nolan's first fact-based movie, and I had very high expectations for it because both Interstellar and The Dark Knight Rises I felt were messy and cheesy and not didn't really represent the director at his absolute best. So I was really hoping this would put him back on that pedestal. How delighted I am to report that it absolutely does do that, for a number of different reasons. The first thing is to address the fact that Nolan himself has said that this isn't a World War II movie, this is a suspense movie, and I do agree with that, having seen it. What he means by that, I think, is that although this movie uses the framework of a real life World War II event, so one of the pivotal events in World War II, within that he extracts three story strands of survival: one on land, one on sea, and one in the air. So on land, which takes place over the course of a week, we have Finn Whitehead and Harry Styles as two young soldiers. In the air, we have Tom Hardy as a fighter pilot, and on the sea, we have the boat captain, played by Mark Rylance. And so all of these stories take place across different temporal lengths, as I've indicated. And initially, at the start of the movie, it's quite discombobulating because it seems quite haphazard and fragmented in an intentional way, because obviously war is very fragmentary, and it takes a while for the pieces to actually coalesce. Once they do start to coalesce and you see how these various jigsaw puzzle pieces all start to come together, something really beautiful does start to take shape in front of you that reminds you of what a brilliant narrative stylist Nolan can be when he's on top form. This takes it all the way back to things like Following and Memento, the latter of which many considered still to be his best film, which obviously Memento, which had its forwards backwards structure, and then you meet in the middle, which reflects the character played by Guy Pearce, his short-term memory loss. Dunkirk really does pick up from that really bold experimental style in terms of shuffling all these time frames around within a wartime context, which really does refresh the genre and makes it very interesting, because I think what Nolan is trying to do here is to show that in war there is no such thing as a singular perspective. There are multiple conflicts all going on at the same time, and you can't see war from either land, sea or air. It's the intersection of all these various things that really make war what it is. And the other interesting thing as well is that one particular story strand, say for example the land strand, doesn't make complete sense until the other ones, say sea or air, intersects with it. So you have it's all relative depending on the position of the various characters and how all these characters come to interact. And so that is really great. So as a piece of storytelling, it's really terrific. Visually, well, very little needs to be said here. It's shot on IMAX cameras, which goes right the way back to the Dark Knight. IMAX 70mm. If you get a chance to go and see this in IMAX, please do, because it's a real sort of jaw-dropping, tactile, celluloid experience, of which Christopher Nolan is such a fan. He's one of the greatest exponents of celluloid filmmaking in Hollywood, alongside the likes of Quentin Tarantino. Yeah, and in an era where things are increasingly going more digital and indeed more 3D, Nolan has turned away from that and is really favouring the physicality of celluloid and also the immersiveness of IMAX as well. He doesn't favour the cheap gimmick of 3D. He wants IMAX to really pull you into the drama, along with the cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytma, with whom he worked on Interstellar. They create a real extraordinary collage of images and also sound as well. The sound design is absolutely extraordinary and really terrifying, and really does put you in the position of the conflict right from the start, where Finn Whitehead is running away from bullets strafing. I was literally jumping and cowering in my seat because it was so loud. Obviously the IMAX presentation helps an awful lot there. Really, really powerful combination of sound design and visuals to again put you in the heart of a conflict in a way that uses filmmaking language but doesn't necessarily use exposition. There is very little exposition in the movie, although there is dialogue. There is dialogue all the way through. It comes in fits and starts, and you don't get a great deal of contextual dialogue in it. This isn't a blow-by-blow account of Dunkirk. At the very beginning you get an intertitle which very briefly outlines the context of what's happening, and then you're thrown headlong into it with the characters, and you basically have to keep your head above water just as they do, literally and figuratively throughout. And it's a really terrifying sort of battle for survival, and it's a testament to Nolan and the rest of his crew that you really do feel that tension all the way through. It's unrelenting, it doesn't let up. So visually, sonically, absolutely magnificent. As a piece of storytelling, it's great. Hans Zimmer's score is a really, really interesting case, because I'm a big fan of film music, but I'm not a fan of many of Zimmer and Nolan's collaborations in the past. I wasn't a fan of the scores for their Batman movies. I think that they favour dreary sonic soundscapes above anything that's interesting. But I have to say, the score in this film, in Dunkirk, although it is very much of a piece tonally with what they've done before, it actually is much more interesting to listen to in terms of the textures that it goes through. It groans, it grinds, it scrapes. It really does mimic the sort of distorted sort of sounds of metal and shells that are all going on around. It's really, really effective and incredibly deliberately overpowering in a way that actually does work very well. And when I won't give away the context, when Elgar comes into it later on, when the Elgar comes in, that is a moment that is a really, really powerful and inspirational moment, and very moving, and proves that this isn't just a technical exercise. This is actually an emotional exercise that is designed to honour not only the soldiers that were involved in the conflict, the commanders, but also the very, very brave civilians who didn't have any military training. Many of whom didn't have any military training, but put their lives on the line to come across the channel to rescue the personnel from Dunkirk. So it is a celebration of that, and in as much as it being an extraordinary technical exercise, it is a very emotional film as well. I have to point out the aerial combat sequences involving Tom Hardy are fantastic. Nolan himself has said that they were the most difficult parts of the movie to put together, and they are really, really, really quite astonishing. So all of that absolutely brilliant. Storytelling, technical aspects of the movie absolutely impeccable. The acting is terrific across the board. Again, it's interesting, there are a lot of famous actors in this movie, although it's not necessarily an actor's film. But what it does prove is that Nolan is brilliant at casting people with distinct faces. He's a very good face caster. And in the absence of exposition, the focus on facial expressions becomes all the more important. I mean, particularly you've got Cillian Murphy as the shell-shocked soldier who is brought onto the boat by Mark Rylance, who is absolutely adamant that he does not want to go back to Dunkirk. Similarly, you've got Tom Hardy, who's in 99% of the movie, his face is disguised behind a mask while he's flying his Spitfire, but he communicates so well with his eyes and his eyebrows to convey like ferocity, nobility, so on and so forth. Similarly, Mark Rylance, as I said, as the boat captain, or Kenneth Branagh as the naval commander who is watching desperately from the shore as things are getting more and more out of control. And then you've got the Harry Styles, which has generated a lot of controversy. He's really good. Harry Styles is terrific in this movie, and I wasn't sure going in what he would be like, but he really does convince you as a young guy who is completely out of his depth in this conflict. He really does not know how to handle it. and who often lets his anger get the better of him. He's really, really good at that, and it's, absolute credit to him. He's terrific. So, although, as I said, it's not really an actor's movie, they are clearly on the same page with Nolan in as much as the physicality of their performances is a language, in as much as the music, the visuals, and the sound design, as well as the storytelling. I think it's a really, really terrific movie. I think what it does is it peers through the fog of war. It presents you with this absolute horrible fog of war at the start, and then throughout the second half, you gradually see that lift, and you get these glimmers of redemption. But what is the interesting thing is that the hopeful aspects sit alongside the more carnage-riven aspects of it. So you get chaos and hope all constantly circulating around each other. So just when you think that the characters are on the verge of breaking through into something hopeful, the rug will be pulled out from under them, and consequently the rug is pulled out from us, the audience. And that really does remind you of what a wartime scenario is like, that even though there might be a chance of seeming redemption, all of a sudden it is undercut by, say, a torpedo or an aerial raid, and you really do get that sense of unpredictability, which is absolutely necessary to depict this scenario. But what Nolan does brilliantly is he picks out small details as well as the individual details, like the idea of the on boards on when Finn Whitehead and Harry Styles come on board the rescue vessel. They pick out toast with jam on it, and the colour of the jam really does stand out. And there's little details like that in amidst the wider stuff, which really does work very well, and which reinforces the fact this is a very, very human story, as well as being a very powerful, technically extraordinary account of a very, very tough and difficult period in World War II. It is a very, very human film, and towards the end it's incredibly inspiring, and it reinforces the fact that although Nolan is an experimenter, he's not just in this to just coldly play around with time and space. He's also in it to really craft an emotional experience as well. I was really, really impressed with it. I thought it was great. It puts Nolan back up there where I want him to be. Again, after having said that I didn't enjoy his previous two movies, yeah, if you get a chance to go and see it in IMAX, go and see it in IMAX. If not, just go and see it on the biggest screen you can find. It's called Dunkirk. It's directed by Christopher Nolan, and it's really, really terrific. And just a reminder, guys, you can find me on Twitter at Shauno22, and you can find the rest of my reviews here at Kubrick Corner on YouTube. Peace.